different this week. We're now sitting outside in the glass conservatory, and it's raining, but of course our gardens need it. So I'm sure that our gardens will suddenly perk up afterwards. I don't know if you've noticed, but I've noticed that the soil has been exceptionally dry. So this rain is definitely. Thank you so much to everybody who has sent me all of their gardening questions. Again, I'll be sharing these with you, and hopefully I'll be answering them in the way that you can then go off and enjoy your garden. There are several things that we'll be looking at today. People have been sending me some wonderful photos of problems that they've had or the way that plants have grown, and I'll be giving advice on how to deal with those. Also, someone has asked the fact that their plum tree is no longer flowering, and how can I help? I will share that as well. Good morning, Leslie. Good morning to you. Also, someone has asked, why is it that my cherry tree doesn't fruit anymore? So I'll be answering that as well. So several things to do. So we might as well get right in there. And the first question, again, unfortunately, I have lost the people's names, so I do apologise to all of those that have sent them in, but I will go through the questions and I will now answer them. So the first one is, I wanted some advice on saving and straightening a Photinia red robin. Good morning, Mind Over Matter Community Garden Project. Good morning to you. They say that their Photinia red robin, it's grown tap roots through the pot and into the ground, but it's now growing horizontally, and they think it's been growing like that for quite a few years. So how are we going to deal with that? Good morning, Phil. Good morning to you as well. Photinias normally require, good morning, Jalay as well. Good morning to you. Haley, sorry, not Jalay, Haley. Sorry about that, there was a typo. So back to my Photinias. So Photinias require minimal pruning, but they do sort of occasionally need to trim in spring and summer. Good morning, Sally Cat as well. Good morning to you. So they need this pruning to keep it in shape, really, and really to keep the plant under control. I've got some Photinia red robins as I look out my windows here, and they are a gorgeous shrub to have. All I would say is to avoid trimming after mid-August, as any new growth could potentially be damaged by autumn frosts. Good morning, Phil Sky Cross. So thank you. There's lots of people who are popping up, which is really lovely to see you all, and you're all very, very welcome. So going back to this poor little, well, it's not small, this large Photinia red robin that's growing its roots through the pot into the ground, and it's growing horizontally. One good news is that obviously it's doing okay, because the plant itself looks very, very healthy. So that's a blessing, first of all. Now, depending upon how easy this will get out of the pot, depending upon the type of pot, I think it was a plastic pot from the image that you sent me, you may have to cut it out of that plastic pot. Now, if you can then dig it up, roots and all, you might be able to then find that you'll be able to straighten the plant up. The roots might be growing at a bit of a funky angle, but if you then plant it again vertically, stake it with some really good ties, then put in your compost back afterwards, firm it all down, give it a good water, and just keep a check on it, and just keep watering it, making sure that the root ball is moist. Good morning, Rhiannon Pugh as well. Good morning to you. So that might be one option. Good morning, Penny Park. Also, Photinias can become sort of overgrown quite easily, so they do respond well to renovation cutting. And that basically means cutting back hard to a low framework and thinning out sort of congested shoots as they grow back. Established Photinias, like the one that was in a photo, are normally fairly low maintenance. And as an evergreen, they are still flowering or about to flower in mid-spring. So ideally, you want to sort of do any pruning immediately after that flowering has happened. You can then cut out any sort of crowded shoots, make sure that the tree is looking happy from a shape point of view, and then afterwards mulch it and give it a really good feed with a slow release general purpose fertilizer, or specialist rose fertilizer, or a high potassium fertilizer will do well as well. So it's not all doom and gloom. Although the plant is growing horizontally, I would just say dig it all up, get a really strong wooden stake or a couple of them, put the plant up vertically. The roots will be, as I say, a bit of a funky angle. Plant them down normal height to exactly the same depth as they were in the ground currently. Put in your compost, give it a really good water, maybe add some feed at that point, then give it a really good mulch, stake it in very, very firmly, and just keep an eye on it. So it's not, as I say, it's not all bad. As I say, it still looks very healthy from the picture. It's just growing horizontally rather than vertically. You can cut Photinias hard back to about 30 centimeters. And they do respond well to that. So you could, if you were feeling very brave, you could, once you've sort of dug it up, you could cut it right back, plant it up, keep an eye on it, and then let it grow on for the next sort of couple of years to reach that same height again. It's a bit more drastic, I know. As I say, they are lovely shrubs. So hopefully that has answered one of the questions that has come through this morning. Someone's also sent me an image of a rhododendron, and it's got these sort of black spots on them, and they're sort of circular, and they're saying, what's happening to my poor rhododendron? This is a leaf spot infection known as Gliosporium rhododendrii, and it looks awful. It's not really doing much damage to the plant itself, but each of those little circles carry spores, and spores of infection. Good morning, Lucy Jones. I think, Lucy, you're the one that sent me through the one about the Photinia, so hopefully that's helped. You said you're going to give it a go, so fingers crossed. Damp weather always makes fungal infections a lot worse. And of course, we can't help that. We are where we live. So even though it does look awful, it's not doing any real damage to the plant. All I would say is remove any of the affected leaves and dispose of them. Good morning, Adam Lee. You've asked, how can I promote fruiting on my Stella cherry? Okay, Adam, very good. I will be a little bit later talking about cherry trees as well as plum trees. So hopefully there I can answer your question. And good morning, Paul Dugan, to you as well. So going back to the rhododendron, remove those affected leaves, dispose of them, ensure the root ball stays moist. I've just done a little video clip, 1 minute video clip, just to show you about keeping rhododendrons moist up there at the root ball. Very, very important, because that will allow the plant to recover and also to put new flowers on. Good morning, Adam Lee. They're saying I have more blossom on it this year than last. Okay, so that's going back to the fruit tree. So more blossom this year than last, but how can you promote fruiting? Okay, I will get to that one in a moment. So it's, as I say, it's a leaf spot infection on the rhododendron. Doesn't really do the plant much damage. Pick off those tatty, or not tatty, but the leaves that have got the infection on, dispose of them, and also make sure that the ground around it hasn't got any of the leaves down there, because of course the leaves, once it rains or gets wet, the leaf spores will just drop onto the soil and get into the plant that way as well. So just be very clean around that plant and your rhododendron should recover. Someone has sent me a question, and it is this. I was just wondering if you'd mind helping me, and probably others, and of course you will, because we're all here sharing ideas, with a gardening question about bare root strawberries. They say that I decided to plant 3 of them in a hanging basket. Is that too many? and they think the basket is only about 30 centimetres wide. Well, generally speaking, if you're growing a strawberry in the ground, it needs anywhere between 30 and 60 centimetres of space around it to grow well. However, 3 bare root strawberry plants will do perfectly well in a 30 centimetre hanging basket. And of course, having them in a hanging basket is a really great way of growing strawberries because A, they'll look really, really attractive with their lovely flowers, and then of course later their fruit, but also being at the height you can see them right at where your head would be. It's very easy, so it's very practical to actually then just pick the fruit off and enjoy them. It's a great way of growing them. Wookie says, thanks, they will give that a go. I don't know what that's relating to. That might be relating to the rhodie, or it might be relating to the strawberries. With the strawberries, all I would say that in your hanging basket, you need good drainage. So make sure that you've got a nice free draining, multi-purpose, peat-free compost within there. Space your plants out nice and well, and then water them in to settle the compost and to encourage the roots to grow. When the plants start to flower, then you need to feed them with a slow release fertilizer. And of course, you must make sure that you put your hanging basket with your strawberries in a nice sunny location. Strawberries need at least 7 to 8 sunshine hours a day to do their best. Just make sure that you put them in the right position. Also, growing them in a hanging basket also makes it a little bit easier to do cuttings from runners, because obviously, hello Emma Mitchell, because obviously the plant will be growing over the side of the hanging basket and you'll get your runners coming down. You can chop them off, you can pop them up, you can then let them root, and then you've got your own individual plants for free for next year. Or if you want to, you could then lift your hanging basket down, put all your runners around it with little pots all the way still attached to the parent plant, pin them down, and then they'll root. You can then cut them off once you see new growth, and then you've got your free plants again for next year. Good morning. Hello, Chris Harvey. You are all very, very welcome. Also, another thing when you're growing strawberries in a hanging basket is, I would say, try and avoid June bearing strawberries, because all the energy goes into producing runners, really. You'll get the fruit, but then it's really all about producing runners. So go for things like everbearers. Everbearers are great because they'll fruit from sort of June, July, August time. But also, why not give something like Mara de Bois? It's a beautiful strawberry, or Ely or Albion, for example. They're great strawberries, really tasty, although they'll do very, very well. But also, if you're going in a hanging basket, why not try Alpine strawberries? They're a lot smaller, but they're still absolutely delicious. You need a lot of them with cream, but they're delicious added just if you're having them as a dessert. So why not try them? And also, the great thing about Alpine strawberries is that they will actually grow in a more shady position. So if you do have a shadier position and you still like your hanging baskets, then why not try Alpine strawberries? Because they will do really, really well there. One thing I would say is, do not use water retaining gels or moisture retaining soils. They do need it free draining. And the other nasty thing is that a lot of the time these gels contain what are called hydrogels, which are chemical polymers, and they're not always particularly great for edibles. They're perfectly fine for ornamentals, but I would steer clear of those for a hanging basket with strawberries. As I say, just a good multi-purpose peat-free compost will do absolutely well as long as you've got good drainage at the bottom. You want to water daily and feed once a month until flowering. You want to avoid obviously getting the fruit wet, because if you do that, then it'll get infections and diseases into it, and then you'll get mushy strawberries, and nobody likes mushy strawberries. after flowering, you need to feed every 10 days, really, with a high potassium feed, but something that's low in nitrogen. So just to quickly explain the KPN again. So we have potassium. So the way I always think about it is potassium. It sounds like something that's really floriferous, really full, and that's exactly what it's doing. Potassium is great for flowers and for fruit. You then have nitrogen. If you just imagine jun like green, gren, that's for greens, and then phosphorus, which to me sounds a bit like roots, that's good for the roots. So it's just a simple way of remembering what they're all good for. Kathleen, good. What kind of slow release fertilizer should you use for your strawberries? You can get the ones where they are sort of like tiny little beads all held together, and you just literally poke them into the soil. They're absolutely fine. They'll do absolutely wonder. The other one, which I always swear by, is good old bloodfish and bone. I sort of add that to more or less everything that I grow. It's a really good long slow release fertilizer, but there are many on the market. As I say, you just need to look for something that's high in potassium but low in nitrogen. There's probably strawberry fertilizers out there as well, but just a really good slow release one will do absolutely fine. You can also get them in sort of like the tiny beads, and you just sprinkle them into the surface of the soil, mix them up into the soil as well, and they'll do exactly the same way, the same as well. But also, something that I'll be trying this year is also growing edibles in Koya. And the wonderful thing about Koya, hello Andrew Oldham and hello Geraldine O'Brien. The wonderful thing about growing edibles really in Koya is that Koya isn't messy like soil. It's inert, but it holds on to moisture really, really well. Kathleen has said, thank you very much about the strawberry. She said, my bare roots are starting to grow already. That's brilliant news. So they're obviously doing really, really well, and hopefully you'll have a really bumper harvest this year. Hello, Paul Dugan, to you as well. Koya, as I say, it holds on to water. It's a lot cleaner than soil. You know, if it falls out, you can just pick it up by in the hand rather than it all crumbling away. And you'll still get really good results. So it might be worth giving Koya a chance. We know at the moment it's difficult to get out and buy composts, but you can buy compost and also Koya still online, and they'll still deliver them to you. So Koya is sometimes a great alternative. Koya also can sometimes come in like a brick form, and you literally just add water to it and it swells up, and then you can just add it into your pots and grow your fruit and vegetables, and as well as edibles and ornamentals. So give it a go. I'm doing it this year. Let's see how we get on. Then got a query, which is, this is an interesting one. So someone has said, why and when to use the pricking out method versus direct sowing into individual cells? It seems like a needless extra step, but always done on Gardener's World, but I've never understood why. So obviously we have seed trays. You get half seed trays and you get full seed trays. Then you get sort of plug plants, which are sort of individual cells, but they're normally a little bit deeper. You then get sort of individual cells, so almost like a seed tray, but broken up into different divisions, and each of those will become a separate cell. The reason for doing it into seed trays, I suppose, is the fact that we've been doing it into seed trays for years and years and years and years, and really it's about using what's at hand. Yes, of course, there are some plants that don't like being transplanted and are best sown into individual cells, or you wait and then direct sow them into the soil. But I suppose the other thing about sort of growing them into a seed tray is you start to learn about that whole process, about how to care for a plant from the seedling all the way through to putting it out into the garden. Yes, of course, you do exactly the same if you're growing it into a cell, but you're missing out that sort of, I think, that important stage of learning about when to prick it out and when to grow it on. So obviously, with regards to pricking out, you have to let your seeds grow, and then when you see two true leaves, so you first of all get leaves that are very, very generic, and you'll get that on every single plant that you'll see, and then you'll see two true leaves, and they'll be the leaves that represent the plant. When you see that, that's the time you need to prick them out and put them on and grow them on. And pricking out is simply by getting a pencil or a chopstick or a piece of bamboo cane and gently going underneath the plant, getting the roots out. Hello, Charles Benton, getting the roots out, taking out the plant by the leaf, never by the roots or stem, and then potting them up into either an individual cell or into a 9 centimetre pot or 11 centimetre pot with its own compost. And the whole idea there is that you're giving that little young plant its own little home, and it will then hopefully grow away and romp away and do really, really well. Hello, Victoria. That's why I think it's important to learn about that pricking out stage. As I say, I can't really answer why we don't really show more of sowing directly into individual cells rather than into trays. Hello, Pam Miles, welcome to you as well. But I suppose there is also that whole notion is that when you're sort of sowing into a seed tray, you're sort of almost replicating, but a few weeks earlier, what you're going to be doing outside. Because obviously outside you don't have individual cells, you just have bare soil, and you would then sort of sow your seeds into that. So you're doing a sort of similar thing. Also, if you've got really, really fine seed, it's quite difficult, I find, to put fine seed individually into those cells. I find it just a lot easier to sort of scatter them across a seed tray, then gently cover them with either horticultural grit or a sort of a thin layer of compost, and then let them grow and then prick them on. Larger seeds like sweet peas, for example, or broad beans, perfect to grow into individual cells. They're large enough, you can pop them straight in, and there's no problem. Hello, Alan Johnson. Hello to you as well. Good morning. You're all very, very welcome. Like I say, I can't really answer. I can't really say why we don't do more of it on Gardeners World. I think it's just, for me personally, as I say, I think it's important to learn about what stage that seed needs to be planted on once it's grown its true leaves, and then you're learning that whole cycle of a plant's growth. And that's really important to learn. And obviously, it's great fun, and that's why we do it, because we enjoy gardening, and that's the reason why we love doing it. Oh, hello, Katie Sorrell. Hello, Melanie Hollins. Someone has, obviously, rhubarb time. We've got rhubarb in our garden. Absolutely love rhubarb. Rhubarb crumble galore. I love it. They say they have lots of holes in their rhubarb. Something must be eating it. Help. Well, all I can say is, yes, our rhubarb gets eaten as well. So you're not alone, and I'm sure there are other people out there as well. Oh, hello, Gwel Inis Garden. I apologise if I have pronounced that incorrectly. I probably have, but I do apologise. You're most welcome anyway. The good news is that it won't be rabbits that will be eating your leaves, because there's a certain toxic poison known as calcium oxalate crystals, which is inside the leaves and is poisonous. And it's also poisonous to humans. And that's one reason why we don't eat the leaves either. And good morning to Emma Mason PR as well. Good morning, Emma. What is eating your rhubarb? It's more likely to be slugs, snails, and caterpillars. What I would say, in order to control these, I would use a biological control. So something like nematodes is absolutely ideal. It's a bit strange looking. I don't know if people who don't know what nematodes are, they're these tiny, tiny little organisms, and you water them onto the soil. They get into the soil. They then find their host, which is basically a slug or a snail. They get to be gruesome. They get inside the animal, and they then eat from the inside out, and they then kill off your slugs and snails. It looks a bit strange when it arrives. You sort of get this sort of plastic container, and it looks like dried yeast, really, is the best way of describing it. And you normally have to put it in the fridge, because obviously these are living organisms. You put it into the fridge, and then you then take it out. You then mix it up with water, follow the instructions on the packet. They're very easy to follow. Mix them up with some water, and then you water the soil. You don't water the plant, you water the soil. And then the nematodes, as I say, will get into the soil, into the slugs and snails, and they will eat them. And you won't then have edible rhubarb. Obviously, the other approach is, which is a lovely approach, is to have a toad hole. So basically, you can buy these online, but you can also do it just by leaving piles of logs. If you do that, then you may get frogs and toads. Also, if you've got a small pond, absolutely perfect. Because what do frogs and toads love to eat? They love to eat slugs and snails. So there are many, many different biological ways of getting rid of slugs and snails. I would say, obviously there's been a lot in the news about slug pellets. You must only use eco-friendly organic pellets. They're harmful to humans, they're harmful to dogs and cats. And they only include naturally occurring ingredients, such as ferric phosphate. Oh, hello, Julie B. Quinn, and hello, Jonathan Coe. Good morning, good morning. Yes, I would say, if possible, steer away from slug pellets and use a biological control. You can obviously use things like crushed eggshells. You can use wool. Good morning, Isaac Barretto. You can use wool, they don't like that. And also you can use copper. If you use copper rings, when the slugs and snails go over it, they get a little electric charge, and in theory, they will then go away. Sometimes they do come back. They are a pest, I know they are, but that is what's eating your rhubarb, I'm afraid. It will be slugs, snails, and possibly caterpillars. Nothing too bad, as long as they're not eating down into the stem, which is going to be the edible bit, and it doesn't really matter too much, does it? Just enjoy your rhubarb and enjoy your rhubarb crumble or fool. So hopefully that's answered that question. I then had a question, which is, oh, hello, Mind Over Matter Community Garden. What a brilliant name that is. I love that. You're most welcome. So someone has sent me a question, which is, I have 2 bay trees at the entrance to my garden, and one is pretty poorly just now. Any help on what medicine I should use? So there's a photograph, and there's 2 beautiful bay trees, sort of lollipop shaped, at the entrance to the garden, to the entrance to a pathway that goes onto a lawn beyond. There were some lovely pelargoniums and geraniums on the table in front, I have to say. You're obviously green thumbed. Okay, so bay trees. So bay trees will do perfectly well in containers and in the ground, and will last 20 years in a container if they're looked after well. Good morning, Josephine Pinto. And in open ground, they can live for 50 plus years. So they're definitely a herb worth trying to grow, just with a bit of care. So container grown trees thrive on being regularly pruned, either into a specific shape, or just simply pruned to keep that sort of required height and spread rate. The first rule is to grow your bay tree out of harsh winds. It doesn't like harsh winds. It can scorch the leaves. It may be the reason for the poor little bay tree on, I think it was on the left-hand side in the photograph. So as I say, the cold winds and scorching summer breezes, they just don't like wind at all. So you want to find somewhere quite sheltered. And that's really the first rule and the most important rule to follow. Also, it has to be in a position that won't get too much water. This is especially important in spring, summer, and autumn and winter. But hey, we live in the UK, so obviously we get lots of UK rainfall, so it can be problematic. They don't like their roots in waterlogged soil. Good morning, Karen Askew. So what I would say is if you're growing them in a pot, place the pot or container on a stand, and if possible, allow excess water to drain away as quickly as possible. Also, you know, any plant, whether it's in a pot or whether it's in the soil, has been growing there for many, many years, it does need feeding. You know, the soil will soon be depleted of nutrients and all good benefit mycorrhizal fungi and everything within the soil. So it's good to sort of put a top dressing of a mulch or some type of homemade compost is ideal, or bought compost would be absolutely fine. Sort of well rotted manure would also do well. In winter, also, going back to the bay tree, you also want to position your bay sort of either in a unheated greenhouse or outside against heat of a wall. So the wall obviously acts as a radiator, and that will give off heat. That will also help to stop wind burn and provide some minimal protection. There is a pesky pest on bay trees, and it's called the bay tree sucker. The first signs that you'll see on this is that the leaves will start curling inwards, and they'll start to thicken, and then the edges will start to go a bit yellow and then brown. And from the photo, hello John Coyne, you're most welcome. From the photo, the leaves were turning in, and they were going that sort of yellowy brown colour, so it could be a bay tree sucker. It sometimes looks like a fine layer of soot, and it can affect all the leaves or just a few of them. And it's caused by these nasty sap-sucking insects, a bit like aphids, and they excrete a sugary liquid, which is this sappy type thing. And the liquid attracts mold, and that can then cause the leaves to be coated in this sort of black, sort of sooty sort of appearance. Hello, Orlin. First thing I would say is, if it is a bay tree sucker, is wash away any sort of coatings on the leaves. You can use just sort of a hose with a good spray on it, or something with water containing some washing up liquid. Just a tiny amount, just a small amount of washing up liquid will do, and that will just clean off the leaves. And then sort of wash each leaf individually with a cloth. You want to keep them as clean as possible. And then obviously that will make the leaves look great, and it will also help the leaves to photosynthesize. The other way is the other problem is that by washing the leaves, sometimes sort of the pests, those pesky pests, can go onto other leaves. So just make sure you're doing it very, very carefully and methodically. So it could be a bay tree sucker. I'm not saying it definitely is, but it could be. But the most common thing is that bay tree leaves and young leaves, they do curl in. They do sort of, as they get older, they will turn brown. You know, people forget that evergreen plants, they do drop leaves. They do sort of die off. And it happens the same with bay leaves. So I suppose there are really four things I would say from looking at the photo. One is overwatering. Is it getting too much rain or too much water? So therefore allow for maximum drainage. Is it being underwatered? During the summer, is it not getting enough water? You need to have sort of regular watering throughout spring, summer, autumn and winter. So just make sure that you're not underwatering it, especially during the summertime when we sometimes have wonderful summers here. The third thing is obviously cold and wind. You want to make sure that it's away from the cold and wind. And then the last thing I would say is general care. So remove any dead leaves. So look at the soil. Is it compacted? If it is, loosen it up. If it's growing in a pot, remove the top sort of 5 centimeters of compost, add fresh compost. give another slow release fertilizer like blood, fish and bone, and that will then sort of perk up the plant. Also in the photograph, I know it's tricky for people that didn't see the photograph, because as I say, you've got these two lovely sort of lollipop bay trees, and there's a fence on one side, the lawn on beyond. There are a lot of climbers growing on that fence on the left-hand side. Possibly, it could be that as they've been growing over the bay tree, and they could be blocking the plant of sunlight. If there's any pests or diseases on anything that's climbing, then it could get onto the bay tree. I can see that you obviously keep it in check, but it might just be something to sort of just be aware of, is that you don't want stuff sort of growing over it. So as I say, overwatering, underwatering, make sure it's out of cold winds and scorching winds, and just general good plant maintenances. And hopefully, fingers crossed, that will improve your bay tree, and then it's a lovely herb to grow. So now we get on to the cherry trees and the plum trees. The first one is cherry trees, and they're saying that they have a tree. It's a. Bear with me. Let me get the actual question, because it's on my Twitter. Let me just bring that up. So they say they've got a Tibetan cherry tree, and it drops immature fruit every year. It's now a 5-year-old tree. Okay, so good news is fruit trees only. Oh, and Phil has just, Phil's just interrupted me. Hi, Mark, that's my bay tree question, and thank you for a detailed answer. Lots to think about. Brilliant. I hope it does help, Phil. As I say, gorgeous. You've got a gorgeous garden and some really lovely pelargoniums and geraniums at the front as well. So, as I say, the good thing about fruit trees and cherry trees, you only need to convert 1 in 20 blooms to actually have a good crop. Hello, Demo, and hello, Hayley Ilmaz. So what that means is that when they're converted, they often naturally drop from a tree to allow for more sustainable crop based on the size of the tree. So I wouldn't panic too much if it's not producing, or it is producing the fruit, but it's dropping them immaturely. It's probably a natural defense for that size of tree. Hello, Michael Conway Jones. There are several reasons why cherries fail too early, and one could be cross-pollination. So some cherries in particular need a pollinator. John Seaman, is it too late to cut back rose bushes? Just very quickly, it is really, depending on where you are in the UK, but really it is a little bit late. You can cut them back now, and you will have flowers a little bit later in the season. So sometimes it's a good trick to sort of prolong flowering on roses by cutting some of them hard back and some of them leaving them, some of them are sort of cut halfway back, and they'll sort of flower at different times throughout the year. So I would say it's probably a bit too late. If there are probably no frosts in your area, you might get away with it. But if it's sort of really overgrown, then why not give it a go? You might lose some flowers for this year, but otherwise, just give it a go. Good. Hello, Sarah Everly. Thank you for joining. Sorry, going back to cherry trees, cross-pollination. So some cherries need another pollinator, another cherry to pollinate. So you must make sure whether your tree is self-pollinating or it needs a mate, basically. So you can quickly look this up online. You'll see if it's a self-fertile one or if it needs some help. The next issue why sometimes cherries fail is watering. So once a cherry sort of gains a good size, it must be watered regularly, thoroughly and deeply, especially during the fruiting period. Sometimes what happens is that when you sort of water quite loosely, and the water doesn't go down very deep, it's very, very shallow, it deprives the fruit of much needed water, causing it to drop. So just make sure that you're giving your cherry tree enough water. Hello, Ian Thwaites. Lovely to have you here as well. The opposite side is maybe overwatering. I know it sounds awful, doesn't it? Sometimes we say you're overwatering, sometimes you're saying we're not watering enough. Overwatering, too much water, is as bad as not enough water, really. So make sure your tree isn't sitting in boggy, wet soil. Fertilization, obviously your cherry tree, like most plants, will benefit from regular fertilization as well during the year. A nice mulch will do perfectly well for that, and maybe a slow release fertilizer like blood, fish and bone will also do well. Something else that can cause, hello Teresa Murphy, something else that might cause problems are late frosts. We are sometimes caught unawares by late frosts. Hello, Georgie Edwards, and thank you, Johnny. Johnny says, enjoying your live stream. Thank you. You're most welcome. So late frosts, as I say, we are sometimes all hit by late frosts. They can cause havoc on fruiting trees, especially when cherries are starting to form. And they can, obviously, frost can cause the fruit to drop. So if that happens, if you know you're going to get some frosts, sometimes you might just need to wrap up your fruit trees with horticultural fleece. Someone keeps asking me a question regarding honey fungus. I will try and get to it. We are running out of time, and I still got to get onto plum blossom. If I can't get enough time, I will have to leave it till next week. So you'll just have to come back next week and join me. Going back to the cherry tree, obviously bird damage is another problem. Birds obviously love fruit, and cherries they really love because they see the red and they just go for it. So if you see a lot of birds, sometimes they can cause the fruit to drop. Please, 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 please don't net your fruit trees. I know we've been seeing it a lot. It's really bad. Birds can get caught up in them. All I would say is maybe, put up with it, leave a few of the fruits for the birds and enjoy the rest. All I would say is try that. It's sometimes a good thing to just leave some of the fruit for the birds. With the cherry tree also, it may be down to pruning. Lorna, hello, good morning to you, Lorna. So with pruning on cherry trees, you want to sort of maximize light to the leaves, and that will obviously help with photosynthesizing, and will help hopefully minimize fruit drop. When what's called runoff, which is fruit dropping, occurs a lot after pruning, sometimes what you need to do is you need to allow more space between the branches. Also think about reducing and thinning the fruit. What that means is literally reducing the number of fruits that are growing on the tree. You want to aim for around about 10 fruitlets per spur. So I know that sort of doesn't sound like much, but if you imagine a tree full of fruit and you've got 10 fruitlets per spur, that's going to be a lot of fruit. And you want to sort of just thin them out. And if it's a bit overcrowded, just thin the cherries out. It will create a nice balance, and it will support leaf area and fruit, and increase fruit retention. You can obviously, as I say, mulch, and sometimes it's also quite a nice idea to use a light-coloured mulch underneath, which will sort of bounce off light as well upwards towards the fruit. That can sometimes help. But the main problems, I suppose, with fruits dropping on cherry trees is poor weather, especially at blossom time, low temperatures, especially if we get a late frost, and if we sort of get wet, cold autumns, then fruit yields are normally a little bit lower as well. But they're still wonderful plants to grow. We've got a cherry tree in our orchard. I think we've probably had 2 cherries off it because the birds get most of them. but I grow it mainly for the blossom because it has the most gorgeous. Ours one has the most gorgeous white blossom, really large flowers, great for pollinators, and it's doing really, really well. And we get the fruit, but as I say, the birds eat them, so we just put up with it. It doesn't really matter too much to us. I am aware that it's now 45 minutes, so I will now sort of look at plum blossom. So plum blossom, the question I had on the plum blossom. Now with me, let me just go back to my phone again. So I've got multiple screens all over the place. They're saying their plum tree isn't flowering each year. It did in year 1 and it's now year 4. I treat it like the others, giving it a mulch in the autumn, but that's all. I pruned it a bit in July, stumped. I think they mean they're stumped rather than the tree's being stumped. So Helen, hopefully I can help you. If crops diminish, they're sort of produced biennially. Sorry, I haven't got my teeth in. And therefore you can sort of get sort of small fruits, poor quality. So poor crops, why is that? Well, in spring there can be long stretches of bare wood with the occasional tuft of leaves of flowers and often at the ends of branches. And fruits such as apples and plums may fruit in alternate years. We have that here in our orchard. Sometimes we have a good year, sometimes we have an off year, and that's really just what's called biennial bearing. So every other year you get your crop. To sort of help sort of ensure you get the most fruit, you want to again check your pollination requirements. So check to see if you've got self-fertile trees or whether they need to be cross-pollinated. Hello, Kathleen, to you as well. In frosty periods, again, if you know there's going to be frost or you're living in a frost pocket, horticultural fleece is great. Cover the plant with horticultural fleece. That will protect the blossoms and therefore will protect the plant. Obviously, also make sure that where your fruit tree is growing, try and be sort of grass and weed free as much as possible around it. That obviously helps when you're fertilizing it and mulching the plant as well. If the trees have become neglected, we've got one in particular, we've got one plum which has become neglected, then sometimes renovation pruning is needed. And you want to do that sort of during the summertime for plums to reduce the risk of silverleaf and bacterial canker, which is what I've said in one of my 1-minute gardening tip videos. If there are no buds present after winter, then possibly birds could be a problem. Bullfinches really, really love blossom. They really go for it. And as winter food becomes scarce, birds will eat buds of cherries, plums, and pears. You know, unfortunately, again, it's living with wildlife. We need to do what we can do to do our best for wildlife. So if there are no flowers or no flower buds present at all, then there are again sort of 6 basic needs for fruit production. One is the tree development. So your plant, you say, is only, from memory, sorry, it says it's only around about 5 years old. That's still quite young for a tree. You may have bought it a lot younger. You may have bought it when it was 2 years old or 1 year old. It is still young, and it will take sort of anywhere between 3 and 4 years to really get going. So sometimes patience, I'm afraid, is all that you need. Pollination is that other thing, as I said. Make sure that you don't have just a self-fertile one, or you need one that needs to be cross-pollinated. Make sure, just double check it. Make sure about the hardiness of that plant within the area that you live as well. Make sure it's a good variety that's going to grow in where you live. Pruning. Again, saying about air circulation. They need good air circulation. They need that sort of right balance for pruning. Heavy over pruning can cause a tree to produce too much vegetative growth, and under pruning can cause the development of too much fruiting wood, which can be the culprit of overbearing and fruit dropping. So it's a bit tricky. I know how to get the right balance. Obviously, like for most trees, you want to aim for this lovely sort of open goblet shape. No branches going in towards the center of the tree, nothing crossing, nice air circulating. Imagine that a bird can fly straight through the tree. Also spacing of other trees. If you've got other fruit trees around it, make sure you've got enough space around those fruit trees so that they're not too closely packed in. They need that space to grow. They need it. They want to sort of get there with the roots in the ground. They want to get as much nutrients as possible from the soil. So obviously by having other competing plants around it, they're obviously going to be taking nutrients away from it as well. Soil condition is obviously also very important. If you've got, you want to find that sort of right balance of food and soil elements. So you want to have plenty of food reserve for the plant, but you might have a shortage of soil elements. This can happen if a tree is tired to overbear, which may cause it to drop its fruit prematurely. Also, if you've got an excess of soil elements, but not enough reserve food for your plant, I wouldn't worry too much about that really at that moment in time. As I say, it's still a young tree. Give it time, let it do its thing, give it space, prune out the dead tree, the dead branches, open it up, make sure it's nice. If all else fails, there are some drastic measures that you can take, but I wouldn't do that really for another couple of years because, as I say, it's still a young tree. But if you've got a mature tree and it's not blossoming or it's not producing great fruit, you can do something called root pruning, and you can do something that's called scoring. So with fruit pruning, you've got to be very brave. You go out there with a spade or a shovel, and you look at the drip line of the tree, and that basically means that where the branches are growing out to and where that sort of water will just drop down, that's the drip line on the ground. Where that drip line or drip circle will be, because obviously the tree will be growing, you need to take your spade and shovel and push it straight into the ground, straight, and then straight back out again. And you do that all the way around. You don't want to dig out any dirt, you're literally making a slot all the way around it. And you move over about sort of a foot or two and repeat that whole process. So basically what you're doing, you're creating like a dotted line, or a dotted line circle really, around your tree's root system. And what that does, it's clipping the feeder roots and shocking the tree into blooming during the next growing season. So as I say, it's a bit more drastic. Hello, Birchfield NHF. I don't know what the NHF stands for, I'm afraid, but you're most welcome to join. Thank you. So as I say, root pruning can work. It's better on sort of more established trees. Your plum tree is still fairly young. So that's one. Another way, as I say, is scoring. It sort of can seem a bit harsh doing this to a tree, but in essence what you're doing is you're taking a knife. So imagine my arm is the trunk of the tree. You're taking a knife and you're scoring around just halfway with a knife. You then go up and then you score the other side of that trunk. So you've got one down here on this side and then another one here on this side. And you just do that a couple of times. And what that does, I mean, as I say, it is a last resort. And you sort of, the lines should never connect up, because if you do that, you're going to destroy the phloem tissue and completely disrupt that vascular system of the tree. But by scoring, it can help with more blossom and more fruit. So they're the two sort of last resorts, I would say, are the scoring and the root pruning. But your tree is still young, you know, it's only 4 or 5 years old. Just try and put up with it. Maybe look at your way you've been pruning. Have you been pruning it maybe a bit too hard? make sure you're opening up the branches, make sure that you've got space around it, give it a good feed, and see how that goes. If in, say, another 2 or 3 years' time it's not doing very, very well, then try the root pruning. Birchfield NHF Neighbourhood Forum. Hoping to start community garden later on a derelict allotment. Oh, how exciting. Oh, that sounds really great fun. I love those sorts of projects. I've done several of those, community gardens and pocket parks. They're a great way of getting the community together. Great way for people to get together and help with social isolation. Obviously, I know we're all self-isolating now, but obviously when normal times, isolation is an issue, and community gardens help greatly with that. Hello, Teresa Wells, you're most welcome, but unfortunately, Teresa and Adrian Wild, I'm afraid that's it. It's now 11:56. All I will say, obviously, to people is I do have a book coming out in September. It is available on Amazon and obviously other good bookstores. It's called Royal Gardens of the World. If you like a really sort of beautiful book to look at, get inspiration. If you're a bit of an armchair traveller, it's a perfect book for you as well. It's got history in it, it's got gardening in it, it's got plants in it, it's got the wonderful royal gardens themselves. Hopefully it will do well. It's also, we're doing a German, Italian and an English edition all at the same time. So please take a look. If it's your cup of tea, then obviously, hopefully you'll buy some. I know, shameless plug, I know, terribly sorry. But obviously every little bit helps. Anyway, I hope to everybody that today's gardening clinic was helpful. It was lovely to see so many of you here and so many regular people coming back again. Thanks for all the advice. See you next week. Thank you very much indeed. You're most welcome. It's been great fun. I will see you again 11 o'clock next Saturday for a gardening clinic. And remember, please, I can't do this without your questions. So please send in your questions to me. There's obviously always things that everyone has queries about. Send them to me. I'll share them with everybody next week. I will do honey fungus next week, I promise. So I haven't forgotten about that either. So thank you so much for switching on, logging on again, watching me waffle on. I wish you all a lovely weekend. Keep safe, keep well, and happy gardening, everybody. Bye-bye.